So with that, I'm going to go ahead and give things over to you, Emil.
Okay. All right. Let me have a.
Oh, do you want to share your screen? Because I'm going to have to probably click on something to let you do that.
Sure. Yep. I have a couple slides here that I put together.
It works. I can see it.
Okay, great.
If anybody can't see it, please speak up. Otherwise, I'm going to assume everyone can.
Okay. So, hey, everybody. My name is Emil. Like Dan said, a couple months ago, he offered to do some financial coaching. And I jumped at the opportunity to do that. I mean, I've been attending these meetings on and off for the last 2 years and find it really interesting. So I thought this would be a good opportunity for me to sort of go in a little bit more depth about a couple of things. And then I had some specific situations that I wanted to talk to somebody knowledgeable about. So I'll explain a little bit about what the format of the coaching was, and then dive into some of the specifics that we talked about, and then wrap up with, the sort of my conclusions. So the coaching structure that we had in place was 7 meetings, a meeting every 2 weeks. They ranged from, they were supposed to be like 45-minute meetings. They always ended up going over, sometimes by quite a bit. The last meeting was sort of a longer meeting with a wrap up that actually ended up being 3 hours long. I think we were both pretty exhausted at the end of that. There was a couple of assignments that was homework assignments that were assigned every meeting for the following meeting, based on the topics that we discussed and that we wanted to discuss. And the topics were a combination of what I wanted to know about and Dan's recommendations that were specific to my life, my situation. And want to talk a little bit about me, not because I really like myself, but because Dan, one of the first homework assignments that he gave was a set of questions for me to answer about my life, my financial goals. And I thought these 3 things were sort of interesting and will give some context about where I'm coming from and what I wanted to achieve. Also, in answering these questions, I had some conversations with my wife, and it was interesting to, I haven't gone through an exercise like this ever. And it was interesting to actually ask myself these questions and realize that there's not a whole lot that I really want or need outside of what I already have, thank God. I mean, of course, there are things that, we aspire to, but generally speaking, I realized that, I didn't have huge financial ambitions that weren't within my grasp. So that was a really neat thing to sort of to realize. So he asked what the top 5 things that bring Erin, my wife, and I joy. We have a 20-month old daughter named Alma, so that goes number 1. We both like traveling. We've done a lot of traveling in our lives and continue to do it. We like having uninterrupted time for ourselves. You can imagine, if any of you are parents, that is a pretty important thing. I'd like to get into sailing. I live in Annapolis. I don't get on the water very often right now because of my daughter and work. But at some point in the future, I really am interested in doing that. And Erin is interested in the arts and art education. She used to work at the Corcoran in DC, closed down unfortunately, and a couple of other arts organizations. And then the next 5 things he asked, I really like my job. I really like engineering. My wife really enjoys gardening, home improvements. Whereas I'm sort of like, I'll do what's absolutely necessary, and then I'm going to go do my own thing. Spending time with family and friends, going on skiing, camping trips, and going out to the movies and getting a drink. And then he asked, what would you do if you want to big lottery. And I sort of thought about it, and I realized, and I talked to my wife about it. I realized that I probably wouldn't change a whole lot. I might not even tell her that I won a lottery. I'd probably just invest, a large chunk of it and keep working the same job, just feel a lot more relaxed about my financial situation and sort of take comfort in the fact that I'm financially independent. Maybe buy a little bit of a bigger house so that we're not as crammed. So that's what I'm after. Those are the things that sort of guided the things that we talked about. So we talked about a bunch of things, and I sort of ordered them in order of importance or bang for my buck. I don't know if this side screen covering up part of
I see the whole slide, if that's what you're asking.
Okay, great. So by far the biggest thing that I think came out of our discussions was the suggestion to take advantage of this after-tax retirement strategy that I think has been discussed at these meetings, or maybe some aspects of it have been discussed, but I just didn't internalize it at the time. And going through it in sort of in detail through a spreadsheet, really brought it home. And basically what this is there's a limit for contributions to pre-tax retirement accounts, which is like $19,500 per year. But then we have at APL this unique opportunity to invest much more in after-tax accounts like the Roth, something close to $100 and something $1,000 per year. So basically, it's a good chunk of your paycheck, if not all of your paycheck. And that option isn't available generally for, citizens in the United States. It's like this APL, very special thing. And it really, in terms of returns, is very, very beneficial, and beats just putting your money into a brokerage or a whole lot of other types of conventional investments that you might make. So because it's specifically retirement, and there's these tax advantaged rules, it really pays to convert as much of your paycheck into these accounts as possible. So there's this strategy that Dan outlined, which is basically take the existing balances in your brokerage accounts, in your savings accounts, and use them to pay your everyday expenses. Meanwhile, you take your paycheck coming from APL and you basically shunt it into these as much as possible into the 403B, and then a lot more into the Roth if you can do it. And this obviously means that you need some assets, some cash to be able to do this, so that you can pay off your day-to-day expenses with and put the money from your salary into these accounts. So if you do have that opportunity, it's a very good strategy. And I haven't set this up yet, but I'm planning on talking to Alan Ashley about it and figuring out the nuts and bolts. So the next thing was I have a rental property in DC that I've had for a while, and I wanted to understand whether or not it was beneficial for me to keep it and rent it for a while, or sell it and do something with that money. And so I came up with this financial analysis to try to explore some of the options, and asked Dan to audit it. And we spent almost 2 sessions sort of digging into it and talking about the details. And the sort of bottom line is, this type of analysis is not easy because there are a lot of variables and a lot of numbers running around, and it's very, very easy to make a mistake. And there could be tax implications and various things that you just may miss because you're not in the know. And that could throw, you give you basically the totally incorrect conclusion. So that's sort of what happened with me. I had one conclusion because of the numbers that I was using. And then Dan looked at it and said, you're forgetting about this thing, and return on stocks is actually a lot higher than what you're assuming. So that basically flipped the conclusion for me. So that was a big thing that's going to affect my financial outlook. And so that was one of the big accomplishments that I think we came to in this coaching session. Dan suggested that we look at car insurance and reevaluate whether or not my car insurance policies were what I wanted, and suggested that specifically that his big thing was increase your liability coverage in order to decrease the probability that you go into big debt from some sort of catastrophe. My liability, and to this point, I have 3 insurance policies. Well, 2 cars and then the rental in my house. And I didn't really know what was in them. I mean, I just had them. They were sort of like boilerplate, whatever the agents had, put into them. And, shame on me for doing that. But this really gave me a good opportunity to go in and at least scrutinize this one. And then I also started looking at some of the others. So I haven't actually changed anything yet, but I have a pretty good idea of what I want to do now. So that was one big thing. I had a bunch of unnecessary policies in there, like redundant services that I have in other places. Like I didn't need any car rental. I had a car rental charge. I had overly large property damage policies. I had roadside assistance that I already had from a AAA policy that I have for my parents. So it was just a bunch of stuff that I could cut out and save some money. And one of the interesting things that I started doing is shopping around at other companies. I've been with State Farm for a long time. And the one thing that I really couldn't find, and by the way, if anyone has any like suggestions about any of these things, not necessarily questions, please, shout them out, because I'm still sort of exploring these things, and I definitely don't have all the information, even talking to Dan. So people's insights are very useful. But one thing that I was looking for is my wife's car. We drive it very, very little. It's like 1,000 miles a year. And there's not, from most companies that I went to for quotes, they don't actually care. They don't give you a big discount for very low mileage, except for Allstate. Allstate has a specific mile, I forget what it's called, MileWise or something like that, where they will discount you significantly. But the problem with a lot of these things is, some of the other companies say, we don't have a specific mileage-based discount, but you can put like a dongle or some device into your car or an app for them to track your move, track what you're doing, and then they promise some amount of savings. And I'm a little leery about, having these insurance companies track my whereabouts and my driving habits. So I'm still on the fence about, because this is what Allstate requires that as well, as they require you to put this thing in your car. And then if you drive very little, then they'll say, okay, we'll give you a good, a good rate. So that's one thing I'm still trying to understand, but that was sort of my lead is that Allstate would provide something that might benefit me there.
Let me jump in, Emil, and just, not for right now, but let me put the question out to you. I would encourage you to check if they are actually tracking your location, or if they are simply somehow hooked into your pedometer, whatever it's called, mile counter, and tracking the amount of driving. Because I wouldn't expect them to track the location, just because that's probably more involved for them. It's more expense to set that up. But I can't rule it out. So if they are not tracking location and just tracking the actual mileage, you might feel a little more comfortable with that. So I would follow up with them on that.
So I did ask that question, and And I'm not sure if all of them do, but at least two of the companies that I went to they do. I mean, there's like
Okay.
long Reddit threads about these things. They do track. I mean, you can even go in. I mean, they sort of sell it as a feature, right? You can go into the website and see exactly where you were,
Oh, wow.
on some date. And not only that, but some of these things, if you're doing it through an app on your phone, which is not required for some of the companies. Some of the companies, you just put a dongle into your car and it somehow communicates without without accessing your phone. But some of these things, they go through an app through your phone, and that's becoming, I think, the most sort of prevalent thing. And in some of these, they actually monitor the phone usage and what you're doing on the phone, and modify the rates based on that. And it's very opaque about what exactly they're doing with that information, because they can see exactly what apps you're opening, and
Sure,
it's
sure,
just
sure.
it's like Big Brother sort of stuff. So yeah, I'm a little leery of that, but it does, in the Allstate example that I saw, it basically slashed the rate for that car in half. So it's a very compelling, offering, but I'm not sure if I'm happy with that level of um, information going out the door. So any more questions? Any questions or anything on that? The next thing was grocery shopping reevaluation. And I think Dan was really excited about this one. And
Yeah.
and basically, I live within 5 minutes of a Giant. I shop at Giant all the time. And his recommendation was, well, you can save a lot more at Walmart, which is about 20 minutes away. And we did sort of a comparison of a number of items, and sure enough, it's I forget what the number was, but it was a significant amount of savings, hundreds of dollars per year probably. And then also things like buy store brands rather than name brands, and then buy in bulk if you can do it. This one I'm struggling with a little bit, and it's just the convenience factor of the Giant right around the corner, and the fact that they have like everything that my family specifically needs. I did, Dan, you kind of shamed me during our last meeting,
Oh, no.
which
I
is
hope I didn't
good.
shame you.
No, it's just, no, in a good way. I mean, like why aren't you doing something about this? And I signed up for, maybe this wasn't the right move, but I signed up for Instacart for free delivery so that I could try shopping at other places. It was a $99 per year free delivery thing. So I don't have to pay for delivery every time. It's the one-time cost, and I can order from a bunch of different stores. Walmart is not one of those stores, unfortunately, but there are a lot of other, like Sam's Club, Costco, Target, all these other, Safeway, all these other stores that are cheaper than Giant. And then you had mentioned that, you get your stuff delivered, and that, saves you some time. And we've done 2 orders now, and the one thing that is killing me is the tip that is suggest. I mean, I have no problem
Right.
tipping. I want to tip, people because they're doing a lot of work, but it ends up being quite a lot more, quite a premium that you're putting on that delivery service. And that was something I didn't really anticipate. So, we're going to try it out for this next year and see how it goes. And, but yeah, that was one big one.
There are a couple questions on the grocery here for you.
Oh, sure.
So one person asked if gas mileage was factored into the analysis. So yes, we talked about that, and the fact that doing the delivery saves you on some amount of driving. Obviously, like Emil said, he's pretty close to the Giant, so it's not huge. But even if you're saving 10 miles each time, the total cost of that is something like $5 to $6, which might pay the tip. So that we did consider that. A couple people like Aldi, which I think is like a cheap place to shop, is my understanding. I've never been there. Another question from Diana was, does Instacart mark up the prices? So I don't know if you would know the answer to that.
So yes, they do in certain situations. I think there was actually a famous case that blew up on social media where they somebody left a delivery person left a receipt in the delivery, and it was like markedly different, much lower than what Instacart said it cost. And actually, that there was a receipt in one of mine, and it was only about, it was very little. It was less than what they charged me, but only by like like a $2 or $3. So it was actually pretty close. But I also know that I looked into getting like a Sam's Club membership, and getting, because they just, they do delivery as well. I think actually maybe through Instacart. And all of a lot of these stores, they mark up their prices even themselves for delivery. So yeah, they do mark it up. I think it depends on how much.
Okay.
See a lot of people like Aldi.
Yeah, it seems to be very, very popular. I'm seeing 4 or 5 people say yes to Aldi. Maybe I'll have to check it out myself, although I got the delivery service. So I'm pretty happy with that. Yeah, I think those were all the actual questions on that.
Okay. So the last one that I put in here is setting up a sort of like a trust for my daughter. So there's 2 sort of historical options for doing this: a UTMA and a UGMA. And they provide, I think, like, so these are ways of transferring my assets to my daughter. And once that transfer happens, that money or assets is locked until it's somehow used for their benefit. And so this is a way, there's various advantages to these things and disadvantages. It prevents creditors or other relatives or them, the children themselves, from accessing this money until they become a certain age, 18 or 21, depending on the state you live in. And it also provides some minor tax benefits. I think the first $1,500 is taxed at the child's rate, and then the next 1,500 is, I don't know, taxed at some other rate. You can somehow save money on the first like 20, maybe it's 2,200. I don't remember.
2,200.
2,200. And the big problem that I originally had with these things was actually my father-in-law set one of these up for my wife and her brother. And I asked him if he would, if there was a good option, and if he would do it again. He said, I would not do it again, because you have to provide, if you have money left over in these accounts, you have to give it, hand it over to the beneficiaries at that age, at 18 or 21. And they just, in a lot of cases, they do something stupid. Not in all cases. You might have a very responsible child and it doesn't, that just keeps it in some safe place. But in a lot of cases, they'll take it, they won't know what to do with it. And they'll blow it. And that's not really why I'm saving the money. I want to be able to, I feel like, if my parents gave me that money at that age, I would probably blow it. And I felt like I only really became financially aware, in my late 20s. But Dan did point out that it looked like as the I don't know, the guardian of that trust could withdraw that money prior to that age, where they would get it, and as long as it was used for certain allowed expenses. And this gets really confusing once you start reading a lot of the information that I found. There are certain things that are not allowed to spend this money on. The primary use historically was education expenses, but you can't use it for like like food or housing, or there are certain things that are not allowed. And there was a lot of discussion of children actually suing their parents because that money was improperly used. So I'm still not quite clear exactly on what's allowed and what's not allowed, and I'd probably have to go to a professional to figure out the exact rules. But it is something that I'm looking at. The the alternative to this for education is a 529, and I think that maybe happened that came about a little later than these accounts, and so a lot of people for education purposes started moving their money into 529s because they're better in certain ways. Okay, so some of the other topics we discussed, alternatives to Audible. My wife and I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and we used to pay like $15 a month for Audible accounts. We both had an account. I ended up switching to, I think, Hoopla, which both of these are like library-based alternatives. So you just check out a book rather than paying for it. And it's great because you can get free books, but it's also not great because they don't have as wide of a selection, and sometimes you have to wait for things because it works like a checkout system at a library. So there's pros and cons there. And I got rid of my Audible account. My wife kept hers. So that's been working fairly well so far. Dan gave me this tip about when to go to a movie theater. Tuesday nights apparently are the cheapest. There are slow shipping options on Amazon that you can take advantage of to gain credits. You mentioned this Google Opinion Rewards thing, Audible gift cards, the raise. I think he's talked about a lot of these things at some meetings. So I'm not going to go into what all these things are, but like Raise, Rakuten, Amazon Shopper Panel. Generally speaking, I talked to Dan about this. I'm the sort of person that, and I think I realized this only like after going through this exercise, I would prefer to, I don't have a whole lot of time to explore a lot of these things, unfortunately. And when I do, I get like frustrated with these things sometimes. Like I tried to use Rakuten about a week ago, and it just was glitchy. It was like it kept on asking me about for my password a million times. And this is the first time I ever used it. So I got really frustrated. And finally, after like an hour of messing with this thing, my kid only sleeps for like 40 minutes. So I'm frantically trying to get this thing to work before she wakes up, which I did right at the last minute, and then she started crying. But it just left sort of a sour taste in my mouth. And I feel like if you have the time to explore these things, they probably work. I mean, I'm sure they're multi-million-dollar companies and a lot of people use them. So I just feel like you need to put some investment into figuring out how these things work and where the best deals are. And unfortunately, I don't have the time to do that right now. So I don't end up exploring these things as much as I could, but I think they're in general very good ways of saving. We talked about choosing, I'm also a proponent of like sort of the Boglehead sort of philosophy, and park your money in like a low cost ETF that tracks the stock market, and you'll do really well. So Dan gave me some tips on try to choose the ETFs that give you that have the lowest expense ratios, even though they say like 0.09%. I look at that, I'm like, that's really low. But apparently there's a 0.03%, and actually in Fidelity there's a 0%. So if you if you know about these things, you can really optimize where your money is and what it's doing. And then things like I've had big returns on my taxes in recent years. So we adjusted my tax withholdings a bit to try to not to loan money to the government unnecessarily. Child tax credit. I already did a lot of these things even before this coaching, but I think these are important, so I put them on here. Take advantage of child tax credit if you have a child. File taxes jointly with your wife. It's usually better. Renting car for road trips is a good idea.
I will jump in and say that might not be true right now. I heard the rental cars are like super stupid expensive right now because of the pandemic. I didn't try this myself, but I heard it's like into the hundreds every day. So I might not give that advice right now, but based on my past experience back in the before times, I would give that advice.
Okay. Yep. Amazon Prime student versions, half price. Prime Day just happened, so there was a lot of great deals. And then we briefly talked about 1031 exchanges, which were applicable to me because of my rental property. It's just basically a way to not pay taxes on a sale of a rental property as long as you roll that profit into another rental property, which I don't think I'm going to be doing based on the analysis that we did. I think it's more advantageous to just sell it and put it into a brokerage account and then transfer it into the Roth after taxes, as I mentioned earlier. But that is an interesting thing. I also, as part of this,
let me
yeah.
just super quickly, Kim, I just sent you a message. If you can take a look at that. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. I also, as part of this, kind of went off the deep end one night. We were talking, this is in the context of, he asked me, how much do you spend on groceries? And I said, I have no idea. How do I even figure that out? And generally speaking, I wanted to understand my financial situation. So I went and pulled all my credit card statements, bank statements, Amazon receipts, and I had to email Giant to see if I could get Giant receipts because I just always threw them out. And they apparently keep very deep. I mean, every single purchase that you make, unsurprisingly, they have a record of it. And they sent me a year's worth of Excel spreadsheet showing me exactly what I bought, when I bought it and how much it was. And so I wrote some MATLAB functions to basically ingest all this stuff, categorize it, and break it down in various ways, which ended up being like pretty useless in the grand scheme of things. Like, I don't think it would generate a lot of nice pictures. And I probably spent too much time on it because at the end of the day, I think what we did was we just looked at the Giant receipts basically and made conclusions about certain things. But it was, I'm just going to plug it because I spent a bunch of time on it. Somebody's got to see it. So if anybody's interested in doing something like this, I'm more than happy to share the code. The hardest part by far was the categorization, which I did by hand. Like I made mapping tables. If I had some sort of AI algorithm to do this, it would probably have been a lot easier. But it may actually be useful in retrospect in the strategy for paying my expenses with savings and brokerage account, because I can actually now, I have this pretty detailed financial picture of how much I spend every month. So actually I could probably project how long it would take me to work down some of these cash accounts that I have. So maybe it will come in useful at some point. Okay, so my overall impressions, I think I expected to receive like investment advice, like how do I know that a stock is good? Where do I put my money? How do I time the market? All this stuff. And I know you're not supposed to time the market, but that was sort of like, I didn't really know what to expect. And what I came out with was sort of much more about saving, like various ways of saving than what to put my money, how to invest it. And coincidentally, I read this book or listened to this book, The Millionaire Next Door by Thomas Stanley and William Danko. It was written in the 90s, and it was basically just a profile of what's the commonalities among all the millionaires in the United States. And basically I don't want to spoil anything, but it's good information, is that basically the common thread is not the income, it's it's how thrifty people are. It's the savings. So if you can save and not get that, have that money going out the door, that's the commonality between all the millionaires in the United States, at least in the 90s. So that was what I found most of Dan's suggestions were really about. Then the after-tax retirement investment strategy that I've talked about a couple of times was probably the biggest financial insight, and I'm going to dig into that here in the next couple of months. And then there was just an improved sort of awareness of my finances. I have a lot of other things going on, and generally speaking, can support, the family day to day. But so there wasn't a whole lot of need to just dig into everything. And this wasn't hard stuff to do. It was just very insightful to actually go and look at what am I spending the money on? And a couple of very easy things came out of it. Like, for example, the insurance policies stuff. We realized we had an unnecessary checking account that was just charging us fees because we weren't satisfying the minimum balance. We had 2 Amazon Prime accounts when you can actually link them for married couples. And a couple other things. So just like little things like this, it just really puts a spotlight on, what are you doing with your money? Where is it are you just losing it unnecessarily? Overall it was really, really positive experience. So that's all I had.
Emil, let me just ask you, and this might not be fair, but if you want to ballpark it, or if you don't even want to answer this, that's fine. But if you think that you could ballpark any kind of number for how much you would say over the course of your life, this is kind of like what we talked about with the 2 timelines, how ballpark how much you would estimate you will accrue in net worth over the course of your life because of the coaching sessions that we did versus alternate reality where we never got together and did that. $10, $1 million, $1 billion, $100, whatever.
So this question is fraught, right? This is a very, very difficult question to answer, right?
Or you can say, I don't want to answer, that's fine.
Well, I'm not going to answer it directly, but
okay.
Clearly, in the realm of hundreds of thousands of dollars over a long period of time. The question of how much would I pay up front, not knowing anything about what I could have done, is a much different one than now that I know how much savings I could potentially have, how much would I pay? Because you could argue, I would pay all of it minus $1, and then I would be I would be ahead, right? So I'm not going to answer that, but it was obviously very, very beneficial. You can judge for yourself if these strategies you think are going to, how much money they're going to save, but very beneficial.
So Emil, thank you so much for giving us that excellent detailed presentation. If we were all together in person, you'd be getting a round of applause right now. So just imagine that virtually.